Pope Francis officially opened the Synod on Synodality this week in Rome. What can we expect from this two-year process? The Papal Posse, Robert Royal and Father GERALD MURRAY, are here with analysis. Will Nancy Pelosi's friendly meeting and photo op with the Pope undercut pro-life efforts by the U.S. bishops? Archbishop of San Francisco, Salvatore Cordileone, is here to react. And executive producer and writer of Touched by an Angel, Martha Williamson, returns to share her latest signed, sealed, delivered movie for Hallmark, The World Over. Begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. An important show for you tonight. If you'd like to comment, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Lots to cover, but first some news. Earlier this week, the Cathedral Basilica of the Immaculate Conception in downtown Denver was spray painted with anti-Catholic slogans, the latest in a pattern of vandalism of Catholic buildings in Colorado. The rector at the Basilica told Catholic News Agency that an eyewitness saw a person spray painting the church around 7:45 a.m. Sunday. According to Archdiocese of Denver spokesman Mark Haas, at least 25 parishes and ministry buildings in northern Colorado have been the target of vandalism, property destruction, or theft since February of 2020. There have been at least 95 reported incidents of vandalism of churches across the United States, Catholic churches, since May of 2020. And Pope Francis formally launched the 2023 Synod on Synodality this weekend. What's the intention of this synod, and where will it lead? Joining me now to discuss this and more is the Papal Posse, Editor-in-Chief of the Catholic Thing, Robert Royal from Rome, and canon lawyer and priest of the Archdiocese of New York, Father GERALD MURRAY, joins us from Manhattan. Thank you, gents, both for being here. I want to begin with the Pope's opening to this synod, where he laid out the objective. He said, quote, "We must not create another church. We must make the church different. This is the challenge. For a different church open to new elements. Let us invoke the Holy Spirit, and with humbleness, let us listen to him, walking together, journeying together, as he, the Creator, wants." Bob, what's the reaction in Rome and your reaction to this?
Well, I think a lot of people are puzzled about exactly what that means, because obviously the church is in trouble in a variety of different ways. But to just speak in kind of general terms about being open, it's good. We do need to have some changes in the church, but what those changes are going to be, it becomes very vague. And one of the things he warned about was precisely this kind of vagueness, using big concepts that only apply kind of internally. People use them, and yet the documents for the synod itself speak about participation and communion and mission and use those very same terms. So the general impression I have from most people is that, sure, we want to reinvigorate the church. The church is hurting in many places in the world right now. But this open-ended approach, we've seen in previous synods when things haven't been particularly well focused, it comes down to the synod committee at the end kind of imposing one vision on what it is. And my guess is, and this is only my own speculation, is that same process, despite the plans of consulting with over 100,000 people, I think that basically it's going to come down to a committee appointed by the Pope who are going to write a document or make recommendations that we can kind of anticipate in advance.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think people can understand responding to contemporary needs, but there was a lot of concern about that quote there, "make the church different." What does that mean to you, Father GERALD?
Well, that's really not clear what it means. Different than what? Different than the current decline, where mass attendance is off and vocations are down and religious life is suffering. Difference in and of itself has no content. We need to make the church more what it is, and that would involve returning to, the roots of Christianity, the roots of Catholicism, starting with the apostles, and then put it into effect. And, the documents leading up to it present a rather vague and generalized vision of people walking together and helping people who are hurting and providing hope and inspiration. Those are all laudable goals, but the question is, what is the meaning of helping people? What is the meaning of accompaniment? Does accompaniment, for instance, mean walking with people who are living sinful lives and not telling them that they're living sinful lives? Does healing someone mean affirming them in their mistakes rather than challenging them with the truth and with God's grace? So pending further clarification, the idea we need a different church, we need a church that's holy and that is dedicated to doctrinal orthodoxy and the pursuit of sacramental life. We don't need a church which would basically be a Catholic version of watered-down Christianity.
Yeah, Bob, very quickly, you've read that Synod handbook. We all flipped through it this week. What surprised you most about that, in both the layout and the content?
Well, I don't know if you are able to put up some of the images from that brochure, but a cardinal handed that to me, and he said it looks like a children's book because it has this artwork that kind of harks back to the 1970s, right after Vatican II, and it isn't very inspiring, and it's very vague in where it wants to go. And I think that Father is exactly right that the kind of change we need is a kind of a deepening of what the church exactly is. I think that this synod on synodality, as much else has happened in this pontificate, shows the stark difference with John Paul II and Benedict, who thought of the church as a ecclesia docens, a teaching church, teaching its own people first, and then, of course, teaching the world, and not in a rigid or a cruel way. But this is all listening. It's a church that is supposed to be listening to, and there's actually a phrase that he uses that will make everyone feel comfortable within the church. I just don't know how that can be, and it just strikes me that there's a kind of idealism here that is not well grounded in the challenges really that face the church at this point. Someone wrote me this week and said, my challenges are to find an affordable Catholic school for my kids that's doctrinally faithful. That we don't have in our parish good preaching. We would like to have good liturgies. We would like to see bishops who are admirable men. These are the concrete things that people are feeling that they need in the churches that we're familiar with. And I don't see that any of that is indicated concretely in these documents.
Well, we've been seeing some questions like that and others that are really surprising in some ways and in opposition to some of what we're hearing on the international stage. We asked last week for people to send in their top 5 concerns that they'd like to hear addressed in a synod, and we're going to reveal those. We'll get into more of that later in the show. I want to go through the 3 risks that Pope Francis urged Catholics to be conscious of, things that could impede the proceedings of this synod. Formalism, intellectualism, complacency. Regarding formalism, the Pope said, quote, "Why do I emphasize this? Because sometimes there's some elitism in the presbyteral order that makes it detached from the laity, and the priest ultimately becomes the master of the house and not the shepherd of the whole church that is moving forward. This requires changing certain overly vertical, distorted, and partial visions of the church, the priestly ministry, the role of the laity, ecclesial responsibilities, roles of governance, and so forth." Father, your reaction to that?
Well, that makes me nervous because the church is hierarchical by nature, and therefore there is a verticality that leads from God to Christ, to the Pope, to the bishops, to the priests, to the deacons, to the religious, and then to the laity. In other words, we are not organized as a democracy where everybody has the same level of authority and gets to vote on how things are established. And, as regards elitism and listening to people, this is an area where there's a lot of concern right now in the church because, the Latin Mass question, the dealing with the sexual abuse crisis. Too often it seems that bishops use their power in ways that are not in accord with what is truly just and right in the life of the Church. And, for instance, as regards the Latin Mass, was there ever really a groundswell on the part of the laity to say we need to restrict the Latin Mass? I think it was just the opposite. And I think it was a preoccupation of some people, and even that's now come under question. We're going to get to that later. So, okay, good. We'll talk about that.
We've got some new reportage on that I want to share. But Father, when the Pope says formalism, intellectualism, complacency, those are the risks. Do you all, and I'll ask both of you this, do you see this as an attempt to preemptively diffuse some of the critiques that surrounded the Synod on the family and the Amazon Synod? Remember, this was sort of the response to those who raised questions about the direction of those synods.
Yeah, intellectualism is a word that I don't know what that really means. Catholic doctrine consists of ideas that are grasped because they've been revealed by God, and then the Church has determined that, in fact, this is necessary to believe. The Creed is a series of statements. The Bible itself is full of, sentences that contain ideas. Intellectualism can be a way to sort of caricature people who insist that doctrinal integrity and clarity is the primary responsibility of the hierarchy. And complacency, does complacency mean I'm happy with the way the Church has been run for 2,000 years and I'm not particularly seeking to change that? The Church, in essence, is the sacramental life, the preaching of the Word, and the experience of charity, all designed to lead us to worship God and live in union with Him. We have saints who have given us clear indications on this. Complacency is not something I see as a problem where Catholicism has lived well. Complacency really is not, for me, a worry unless it means bishops who really don't pay attention to what the people are telling them.
Bob, regarding that risk of intellectualism, the Pope cautioned that the Synod, quote, could turn into a kind of study group, losing itself in abstraction. He said the process would consist of, quote, the usual people saying the usual things without great depth or spiritual insight, and ending up along familiar and unfruitful ideological and partisan divides, far removed from the reality of the holy people of God and the concrete life of communities around the world. Your take on that, Bob?
Well, this trio of concepts, the idea of elitism and intellectualism and complacency, I think we've talked about this before in other episodes of the Posse, that it seems to reflect an internal perception by the Pope. I think that most Catholics in the world these days would hardly think that the Church is elitist right now, or that intellectualism is somehow overly dominant in the Church, and let alone complacency. I think everyone knows that some things have got to change in the Church, if only to save the Church from the disastrous exodus of people that we see, the loss of authority that it has. So, I don't know. I wrote a column about that at the Catholic thing this week. Who needs synodality? I didn't mean that as a flip question, by the way. I mean, I'm seriously asking, who needs to hear this? And maybe it's directed internally to people that he's had to deal with. It seems that the Pope is often in conversation with himself about things that have happened in the past. And these three things, it seems to me, are far down the list of what this synod would have to deal with, even if it's able to manage the large portfolio that it's been given, because it's a global consultation. And what may seem like elitism in one place may just be necessary authority in another. What may seem like intellectualism is the need for teaching in a different place. What may seem like complacency may be actually a certain contentment with God's church in some region in the world. So it's we're going to see how this plays out, but I think we know from the previous synods that probably the agenda is already set, and we're going to see the Synod Committee at the very end, which will select from whatever input has been brought in and what conversation the bishops have among themselves. It's hard to see that this would be the kind of a conversation or dialogue that is envisioned in these documents.
Father Jerry, the Pope has said the Synod is open to all people, not just the usual people, even non-believers. It seems to me by widening that pool of participants to this degree, don't you begin to lose the reality that this is reflective of the people of God? I mean, it looks like it's reflective of the citizens of the world.
Well, let's remind ourselves the title is Synod of Bishops. In other words, this is not a mass meeting of everybody and we're going to pick representatives. Now, synods of bishops do include representatives to guide and inform the bishops, but certainly the only ones who vote on the propositions are the bishops. Now, if we're inviting people outside of the church to contribute, their ideas, that's fine if they are people who share a basic sympathy with religion, with Christianity, with the moral life, with beauty, with art and music. But if we have, the gripers who want to destroy Catholic morality and who hate hierarchical religion and want to see that destroyed, if we waste time listening to, a series of complaints from people who don't like the church, that's not a good way to proceed, and I hope that's not what's intended. But, it's worrying when we just talk about synod with everybody there. This is the bishops who are the chief teachers in the church guiding the flock. This is not the flock telling the bishops what Christianity means now and in the future.
Well, but it almost sounds like that's the approach here. I mean, every local diocese around the world is being grafted into this synod. It's a 2-year process. So they're going to take all those comments, ideas, upsetments, joys in, and then have a discussion with the bishops. So the primary document will be governed by that global reflection. And also, we have to note, at the beginning of this meeting of the synod, Cardinal Mario Grech suggested that the 2023 synod may not involve the synod members, namely the bishops, Father. Even voting on the synod's final document, he said, quote, "It is so impossible, for example, to resort to voting on the final document and its individual items only when consensus is not certain. Is it not enough to foresee reasoned objections to the text, perhaps signed by a suitable number of members of the Assembly, resolved with an additional discussion, and have recourse to the vote as a last resort?" Bob, isn't the point of the Synod to have meetings and the bishops vote and pass resolutions to advise the Pope?
I have to say, Raymond, when I read that, my head spun. I don't know what this possibly means. At one point, he even says maybe the final document won't even be presented to the Pope first. It'll be sent back to dioceses, who will then, send it back to the Pope. So, they're at least in theory, what they're proposing there is that even the process is going to be an open one that supposedly is going to emerge in the course of these discussions. And I just don't think that a meeting that takes place like that can arrive at anything that's going to be very useful. It may be that a document will emerge that basically reflects where the Holy Father wants these things to go. But the process itself is just so unwieldy, and at this point just seems to be going in so many different directions at once that you don't even know how you would arrive at concepts of what we want to be doing to change the church in a positive direction.
Father, if you listen to what Cardinal Grech says there, does this mean a consensus could be declared with no need to test it in a vote that requires 2/3 support? I mean, to borrow a book title from another synod, it sounds like they're rigging the process here ahead of the game.
Well, a meeting of bishops with different points of view is not an objectionable thing. That's how the life of the church proceeds. We read about the Apostolic College in the book of the Acts of the Apostles. There were disagreements. You needed debate. In fact, that's parousia, as the Pope always talks about, gospel frankness. One point he said, bishops should not be afraid to say something that I might object to. Let them speak freely. So the idea that you would change the rules and say we're going to go on the basis of consensus, which, by the way, is a coercive means, because what will happen is it'll appear on a specific proposition, well, we've got 2/3 supporting it, so why don't the 1/3 just keep quiet and we'll say it's a unanimous proposition. That's not an orderly and good way to run things. The fact that there are divisions, meaning differences of trying to understand how to promote the gospel, that is a source of strength in the church, because what it means is you have to make the case for your position based on the evidence, on the doctrine, on the experience of the church, and not simply assert we need to do something because I want to do it. So I hope that Bishop Grech's ideas don't come into play, because it'll delegitimize the meeting if going into the meeting everyone said, the only goal of this meeting is that every proposition be unanimously approved, because what that'll do is put those who are opposed to different ideas in the position of spoilers. And that's not what we want here. That is not gospel openness.
Bob, before we leave this topic, even Austin Ivory wrote recently, last month, that the mother of all meetings has so far registered no more than a blip on the Catholic radar. So far, disengagement has been almost total. What are you hearing about the reaction of bishops, cardinals to this synod? It does seem, aside from us, and I know people aren't always happy with us, but the truth is we're the only people who are giving this any time and looking closely and analyzing what's being said and what's being put forward here, certainly in mass media.
Yeah, I talked with a number of cardinals this week, and of course with local journalists who are interested in Catholicism, and they're puzzled. They're as puzzled as we are in just what we've just been saying. I wrote about this also earlier this week at the Catholic thing, and I look back at the previous synods, which seem to be contentious and seem to be moving in certain directions. And if you look at the synod on the family, well, there was some controversy about the positivity of gay relationships, but that kind of dropped away because too many people opposed it. And instead what we got is kind of, sort of, through a footnote, communion for the married and the divorced and remarried. In the youth synod, I think young people are basically still in the same. The kids who came here were really quite inspiring, but pretty much young people are where they used to be. The Amazon Synod, Pachamama aside, which should have been held in the Amazon region and debated there. Again, other than the outrage that it produced, did it change very much in the church? I think we have to say no. And those were three synods that actually had a fairly clear focus. I don't know what, and the people I've talked with don't seem to know what can possibly come out of this that is going to transform the church in the way that many of us would be happy to see, a new outpouring of the Spirit, a sense that Catholicity has something to say to its own members as well as to the world right now. Those are the things that John Paul II and Benedict tried to do. And we don't know. Francis seems to point in so many different directions at once that we don't even know what these terms mean. I think we'll just see when we finally get some results.
We only have 5 minutes, so I want to get to a couple of stories here. A breaking story from Washington. President Biden announced his pick for U.S. ambassador to the Holy See this week, pro-life Democrat Joseph Donnelly. Donnelly was the co-chair of Catholics for Biden and was formerly pro-life. Catholic League President Bill Donohue issued a press release on Thursday decrying the pick. He says Donnelly is not only at odds with the Catholic Church on abortion, he is pro-gay marriage, against religious liberty, and against school choice. Father, your thoughts on this appointment?
Well, I'm not happy when I hear there's a Catholic who supports things that the Church teaches we should not support, particularly the killing of unborn children, the redefinition of marriage, and making homosexual activity equal to married life. So that's not a good thing, and it's a shame that the Biden administration would not have picked someone who is, in order to be the interlocutor with the Holy See, be someone who would be, not a source of disagreement and that sort of thing. So I'm not happy about that.
Bob, reportedly, the Holy See has already greenlit this appointment.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to over-dramatize it, but there is a kind of a Trojan horse quality to this, that he's not a fire breather the way, say, Nancy Pelosi or Biden himself are on these dissenting issues. He seems to fly a little bit more underneath the radar, and maybe that is at least a concession of some sort to the wishes of the Holy See. But I agree with Father. This is not at all very good, and I think that we've already seen with the appearance of Nancy Pelosi this week here in Rome how this begins to affect our politics in the United States. And we know that Joe Biden, by the end of this month, is going to meet with the Holy Father right before the bishops' meeting in Baltimore. I have to say, in all candor, I really think of this as kind of a type of meddling in the internal politics of our hierarchy and our nation as well, because there's a serious debate that has to be had about whether the President of the United States of America, the leader of the world, can hold the positions that he does and advance them really vigorously on gay marriage, on abortion, wanting to even pay for abortion with taxpayer dollars, that we can have that without pushback from our bishops. And it's clear that the Pope, by meeting with both Pelosi and by Biden, is kind of tacitly giving them a get-out-of-jail-free card.
I want to move on to new reporting by Diane Montagna that suggests that Pope Francis's motu proprio, Guardians of Tradition, which restricted celebration of the traditional Latin Mass, may not have been based on a survey sent out by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith to the world's bishops. The bishops were supposedly polled about the implementation of Summorum Pontificum and the traditional Latin Mass. That was Benedict's motu proprio that freed up celebration of it. According to Montagna, her sources tell her, restrictions on the Latin Mass were suggested at a plenary meeting of the CDF at the end of January 2020. That was 5 months before the questionnaire on the Latin Mass was sent out to the bishops in May. Montagna says, according to reliable sources, Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Parolin, Cardinal Ouellet, who's the prefect of the Congregation for Bishops, and Cardinal Versaldi, who is the prefect of the Congregation for Catholic Education, were leading the discussion and piloting it in a definite direction. The hour-and-a-half meeting wrapped up with the following quote, "Tradition is the living faith of the dead. Traditionalism is the dead faith of the living." End quote. Father, what do you make of this news?
Well, the news is quite revelatory and disturbing because the report, which has been seemingly verified by anonymous but reliable sources, is that by and large, the bishops in Western Europe and the United States, including even the German hierarchy, saw no need for changing the arrangements that Pope Benedict had put into place. And that the Pope's concern for disunity in the Church and that people were making an ideological statement out of the Latin Mass, that was a reality that was really not present, maybe in exceptional circumstances. But, as I analyze what's happened, there was no groundswell among the American hierarchy, certainly, and I don't think among the Europeans, to get rid of Pope Benedict's liberalization of the Old Mass. I think this is a preoccupation of some churchmen. And sad to say, in Italy, the Old Mass has not been given the generous reception that it has in the United States and in France. And I don't think the Pope is personally sympathetic. As you may recall, numerous times he said people who are attached to the Old Mass have some kind of problem they're trying to deal with. He sort of implied that they were frozen, rigid, all these kind of things, which I think is grossly unfair. And I think most bishops who responded to that survey were either neutral or positive about Summorum Pontificum. So what we're seeing here is, sad to say, an area where the hierarchy is detached, I think, from the reality on the ground, and that more sympathy to what, the Pope always talks about people on the margins. Marginalized people would be people like the Old Mass in the diocese where the bishop doesn't. And sad to say, now bishops can shut it down, as some have done. This is not, I think, pastoral charity or justice.
Bob, it does appear 2/3 of the bishops responding to that survey on the Latin Mass were on board with staying the course. If all of that is true, why go through all the trouble to limit or squash the traditional Latin Mass when, Mass attendance, particularly among young people, it's down to like 17, 19%. It's really low.
Yeah, it's quite puzzling. We didn't see the bishops of the world standing up and saying, "Thank you, Holy Father, you've resolved some major problem for us." He just said this week that unity in the Church, but not uniformity, which would seem to apply, that formula would seem to apply to the Latin Mass. The whole point of that mutual enrichment was to say this has been a part of our tradition, the central liturgy in our Western Church, and as Pope Benedict intended, that there was this mutual enrichment that was going on, that we learned from something that was traditional, but not traditionalist in the wrong sense. And at the same time, there was some flow back and forth with more, modern elements. For me, I think that we're starting to see a pattern here, and I'm sorry to say this, but I want to be candid about this. The term rigging has been used about some of the previous synods. You could actually say about this that even before where they got the results in the direction was determined, and it all, I think, undercuts what the Pope says quite often, that he wants to consult with people. He wants to get input. As Father said, he wants people to speak out boldly. But at the same time, there seems to be no real engagement. The dialogue that he hopes is going to take place seems to go only in one direction. And the Latin Mass people, I think, are just a small example of this. But I think overall, when we look back historically, we're going to see that there was a lot of talk about a dialogue and about differences and being welcoming of all people. And in fact, the direction of this papacy moved very much in one single direction.
I got to get to this open letter published by an ex-Swiss guard, Pierre-André Udressy. And he says of the Vatican's vaccine mandate, quote, "What is certain is that in all this, what we are experiencing has nothing human, let alone Christian, about it. And it is truly intolerable to see the Holy Vatican City come to this point." He said he lacked a medical exemption and was neither pro nor anti-vaccine, but wanted to better understand the implications and the reason for the vaccine and decide for himself. Pierre is one of the 3 guards fired from the Swiss for not complying with the mandate. Bob, very quickly, you've written about the guard. Why is this happening in the Vatican when the CDF has said this is a matter of conscience?
Yeah, you would think that there would be a certain consistency between that moral evaluation and even just, there are lots of people who are skeptical of taking the vaccine because of their own health reasons. It isn't always a question of moral theology. But there just seems to be, on this, as on some other issues like environment and refugees and whatnot, a kind of desire to be with that internationalist ethic that's out there. And God bless this young man. He stood up and just said it's wrong to compel people's consciences or even their medical decisions. There may be various reasons why they don't want to take a vaccine or do want to take a vaccine. So it's indicative of the ways that there just seems to be a desire to kind of make uniform reactions to problems inside the Vatican.
Yeah, you might call it rigidity. Before we go, the news just broke that a high-profile Anglican bishop, Michael Nazar Ali, is converting to Catholicism. He'll be ordained a priest of the ordinariate at the end of the month. Father, what is the significance of this conversion? He's very well regarded in the Anglican and Communion, and certainly in the UK.
Yes, the Anglican bishop who's converting is a brilliant man. He's a man of great intellectual gifts. He is from Pakistan originally. He himself has made the journey that Cardinal Newman made, that Ronald Knox made, that so many very prominent, well-respected Englishmen have made, which is to say that, Reformation Christianity, which cast aside the Catholic Church in England, is not where they want to be. They want to be in full communion with the Catholic Church, with the Pope, and they want to live the full sacramental life. So for me, this is a cause of rejoicing and joy. Cardinal Newman is one of my inspirations in life, and having read his works, I understand these are decisions based on the faith and devotion of the man to God and his truth. And we live in an age in which truth is cast aside. Everyone says, well, what's your truth? And I think the conversion of this bishop tells us Jesus is the truth. Jesus founded the Catholic Church. That's where I want to be. And I pray that will be something that more Anglican clergymen will embrace, because this really is the path of unity in the Catholic Church under the Pope.
Yeah, I knew him a bit right after 9/11. He was coming to Washington quite a bit, and because of his family's background, as partly Muslim and then conversion to Christianity, Anglican Christianity initially, He was speaking out very boldly about people not accepting the view that Islam was a religion of peace and that we could all just get along and that we should understand the differences. He was very powerful. He's got a very strong mind and a very strong will. It's interesting, as we heard this week, we don't really know for certain, but it appears that the Holy Father tried to convince him to stay where he was, that he didn't need to become a Catholic because he was already a Christian. If that is true, then I think it's regrettable, because when the leader of the one holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church tells somebody he doesn't need to become part of that entity, I don't know where we are, frankly.
We will leave it there, gents. I thank you for the commentary. You can read more of Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray's commentary at thecatholicthing.org. Archbishop Cordileone is up next. But first, last week I told you we want to open up this synod on synodality to not just those in Rome or in selected dioceses, but to you. So we've decided to accompany the Church on this synodal journey and open the process up to you, the viewers and listeners of the world over. So I asked you all to choose 5 topics that you're most concerned about right now. We've received hundreds of responses so far, and we want to keep those coming. So go to Twitter at WorldOverLive, or you can email us at worldover@ewtn.com. Send in your list of the top 5 topics you'd like clarity on. What would you like the Church to discuss and focus on? In the coming weeks, we'll feature World Over Synod specials. We'll invite church leaders, experts on any given topic, and have a lively conversation, and we'll even take your questions. What are the burning issues in the Church you think need attention now? Go to worldover@ewtn.com on email, or you can tweet me at WorldOverLive. The question is also up on my Facebook page, and I'll announce the results in a few weeks. Let your voice be heard at this global synod of sorts. Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's visit with the Pope and the ensuing photo op have caused confusion among many Catholics as to what the Church actually teaches on life and whether or not that teaching has changed. Here now with his thoughts on the matter is the Archbishop of San Francisco, Speaker Pelosi's home diocese, Salvatore Cordileone. Archbishop, thank you for being here. I need to ask you now about this meeting between the Pope and Speaker Pelosi. As you know, it comes on the heels of the most sweeping abortion bill really ever to pass through the Congress, which Speaker Pelosi not only championed but led. Your reaction when you saw the images of this meeting?
My reaction is more to people who are getting the impression that somehow this is a signal that the Church is letting up on its teaching about the sanctity of human life in the womb, especially Pope Francis, who has spoken very strongly about this. That's the thing that's bothering me the most. You know, popes meet with world leaders all the time, all kinds of different world leaders who have different things in their background and maybe opposing values, but they meet with them anyway. They apparently spoke about certain other issues that are of great importance. I'm one of the many bishops who have emphasized that abortion is the preeminent issue, but preeminent does not mean only. There are other issues that are of importance as well. So I don't know the background of this meeting, how it came about, but I do know the popes regularly meet with world leaders. I was in Rome in the 1980s. I recall when Pope John Paul II met with Kurt Waldheim, who was the president of Austria at the time. It was shortly after some allegations came forward about his involvement as a German army officer in World War II and deportations of Jews to death camps and reprisals against Yugoslavian partisans. And so there was some controversy over that, but he met with him anyway. So I think it's perfectly understandable the Pope would meet with prominent world leaders when they are in Rome.
Well, look, let's lay all our cards on the table. Pope Benedict met with Nancy Pelosi many years ago. He did not allow photos to be released of that visit, and then he quickly issued a statement saying, "We spoke about the value of human life and the obligation of legislators to defend human life." That did not happen this time out. That photo went out to the world, and it looks like the Pope and Nancy Pelosi are simpatico, and frankly, you're on the wrong side of the Church, Archbishop. That's what a lot of people took away from it.
Well, they may take it away from there, but again, Pope Francis could not be clearer in his condemnation of abortion, and that's what the Church has always taught. The Church recognizes the innate human dignity of every human life from conception to natural death. And so we're certainly all true believing Catholics hold that. Her position on abortion is very problematic. That's why I'm inviting people to participate in the Rose and Rosary for Nancy campaign, asking people to pray a rosary once a week and to fast on Fridays for her. She loves her Catholic faith, but there's a real disconnect on this issue for the conversion of her maternal heart. People can sign the petition at benedictinstitute.org, and if they do and make that commitment, we'll send her a rose as a simple symbol of their prayer and sacrifice.
And I know you've had thousands and thousands of people sign up for that. The images of that visit, Archbishop, do they send the message? I had some emails this week into our show box, and they said this seems to send the message that you can advance abortion on demand, defy your bishop, and still be a Catholic in good standing. Did it?
The Pope has to use his own discretion as to what issues to address when he meets with world leaders. I don't understand how popes make those decisions, but like I said, many issues are of importance, and Pope Francis had his reasons for speaking about the issues that he did with her, and I'm not going to second guess that. Again, he's been very clear in his teaching on this issue, and it would be wrong to infer that somehow this is giving Speaker Pelosi a pass on the abortion issue.
What do you make of the announced meeting, announced today, between the Pope and President Biden, which will come at the end of the month? And some are suggesting that this could be a way to blunt the bishop's discussions of Eucharistic coherence, who may or may not receive the Eucharist, which is coming up in November. Your thoughts?
We'll see what happens. It's certainly a normal thing for the Pope to meet with the President of the United States when the President is in Rome. That's kind of standard procedure. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. In fact, I think it would come as a surprise if the Pope refused to meet with him if he were in Rome and asked for a meeting and refused to meet with him. So I don't think the fact of the meeting in and of itself is sending a signal that somehow the bishops are off on this teaching about Eucharistic coherence. After all, we are taking some of our inspiration for this from the Apardicida document back in 2007 that then Archbishop Cardinal Bergoglio helped to draft and was a big promoter of, which speaks very explicitly. In fact, we get this term Eucharistic coherence from that document, and it speaks about Catholics in political life and in government and in healthcare, that if they're promoting grave evils that are attacks on human dignity, mentioning specifically abortion and euthanasia, that they are to refrain from receiving Holy Communion because it would be inconsistent, incoherent. We're taking inspiration from that. And again, the then Cardinal Bergoglio was one of the big promoters of that. So again, I would caution people to jump to conclusions as to what this meeting means and kind of drawing inferences that likely are not there.
Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone, thank you so much for your time today. For more information on that Rose and Rosary for Nancy campaign that the Archbishop mentioned, you can go to benedictinstitute.org. Thank you again, Your Excellency.
You're welcome.
She was the first woman in TV history to executive produce 2 primetime dramas simultaneously. As producer and head writer of Touched by an Angel, she guided the show through 9 seasons, drawing weekly audiences of 25 million people. She is here tonight to talk about her new made-for-TV movie for the Hallmark Movies and Mysteries channel, Signed, Sealed, Delivered, The Vows We've Made, which premieres Sunday, October 17th. Please welcome back to the program, Martha Williamson. Martha, thanks for being here. Signed, Sealed, Delivered, The Vows We've Made is your 12th movie in this series that first began as a weekly series, and then Hallmark Channel made it a movie series. Now, Oliver and Shane are finally getting married. This feels a little bit like a finale, is it?
You know, it's funny. I was just talking to a friend of mine who follows the show religiously, and she said, "Is this it? Is it over?" And I said, "You know, I really am waiting for God to tell me what's next." I think that one of the most powerful things about this show is that over 8 years, Raymond, we have taken these two very different couples through a long, long journey. And it's not your typical Hallmark show. You know, some people laugh and say, "Not your mother's Hallmark," but it is. We've gone through a lot of difficult challenges, and while they were delivering lost mail, dead letters in the dead letter office, and we've addressed all kinds of significant issues, you know, racism and sexual assault and poverty. We did a show about Hurricane Katrina, things that you don't really expect to see on Hallmark, but you do expect to see them handled the way we handled things on Touched by an Angel, you know, thoughtfully, but still with reverence and something that made it possible for a whole family to watch. And so here we are again with Oliver and Shane. And Oliver, one of the biggest challenges, Raymond, of our show was that I didn't want to show the typical people fall in love and then they have an argument and then they go away and then there's a big misunderstanding and then they make up and, you know, and then there's a puppy and they kiss on the bridge and then there's a rainbow. You know, Oliver had very, very serious issues. And so this big movie may not be the end, but it certainly is the end of a lot of problems that Oliver had.
Yeah, and you delve into those again with sensitivity. But look, he's lost his mother, he lost his first wife, and that's all grappled with in this movie. But for those who don't know the series, Signed, Sealed, and Delivered is about a group of dead letter office employees who reunite lost mail with intended recipients. Where did the concept of that originate for you, Martha?
You know, it's interesting. We talk about the idea of the lost being found. You know, I would never write anything that I didn't feel literally inspired to write. You know, that the Lord put something into your spirit to share, and the sense that things that are lost can be redeemed. They may seem irreparable, and it's impossible to return to what they were originally intended for, or the recipient, or you think you're supposed to go this way, but your letter or your life is supposed to go that way. And I think one of the most powerful messages that we have, again, is trust the timing. You know, God's timing is perfect, and that's the message that we share every single time, and that's what I wanted to say. So I was trying to find a way to send that message that you will be delivered one way or the other, sooner or later. And what better way to do it than with the U.S. postal system?
Right. Well, they can be a little slower than you are, Martha, but I'm not going to get into that. Look, in a recent interview, slower,
but they do need our support.
I agree. In a recent interview, Eric Mabius, who plays Oliver in the movie series, said when he first got the script for the pilot in 2013, he thought it was smart, and he said of you, there's a wonderful way about Martha and her ability to pluck one's heartstrings without being sappy about it. What did you hope audiences come away with this series with when you started it? And I think a bit of that answer might be in what you just told us and the voiceover at the top of this episode, which reads, "To a postal worker like me, I believe we are all in some way living letters, unique souls slipped into fragile human envelopes, stamped by our Creator and sent into the world with a story only we can share, even if we're missing a stamp or two." Are we all living letters?
Yes, absolutely. You know, we are all unique creations. We are all children of God, and each one of his children is special and dear, and there's nobody else like you, and there's nobody else like me. And I'm in a hotel room, and there's nobody else like the lady who's working outside in the hallway. You know, everybody is unique. Everybody has been given a gift, and we all have the opportunity to be used. And so that's why I love the idea of trying to make people laugh about it, because it sounds,
Right.
there's a lot of people sort of roll their eyes these days and say, oh boy, here you are talking about God and love and Christianity. And the truth is that when you are honest, and you can make people smile and you can make people laugh and finally end up with a great truth about yourself, to be challenged, to be challenged to some sort of self-examination, then we've accomplished something on our television shows. We have a message in this particular episode about how it feels to be abandoned, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you've been abandoned by your parent or by your wife or your partner, but the many people have experienced tremendous loss and felt left behind. And there's a message in there for anyone who feels that they wonder what the future can bring. How can I be reunited with what really matters?
Right. Well, there's a lot of drama here, and I mean, I intended to just watch bits of the movie. I ended up watching the whole thing last night. It sort of pulled me in, and then my wife came in and said, "What's happening?" I backed it up. We watched it. There's a lot of humor here, as you mentioned a minute ago. I want to share one of those moments with the audience. This is Shane reacting to finding out that her mother has arrived in town a little earlier than expected.
No.
It's an extra day. Your mother can't be that bad.
No, she's not bad. She's just peculiar and opinionated, and she makes me so.
All right, perhaps she's not everyone's cup of tea, but
She's not even a cup. She is a kettle of crazy. She is a laboratory beaker full of bad chemistry. She is the holy grail of guilt. And I can only spend 2 days with her at a time, 3 tops. And now it's 4. 4, Oliver. That gives her enough time to reorganize my spice racks and refold my laundry and give my cashmere sweaters to Goodwill.
In addition to the humor, Martha, you also create characters of deep faith, like Oliver, and he really does search prayerfully for those letters that will change the lives of those when they're finally delivered. And as we talked about earlier, he finds himself in a messy situation here. Why is faith an important element, not only to that character, but to this work in this series?
Well, first of all, we start with a character who is problematic. When I went to Hallmark, I said, I want to talk about faith in a way that real people are dealing with it. Real people. I don't want to see a little boy who has faith that his puppy will come back. That's interesting, but I want to see a man who has faith that his wife will come back, and then is challenged because his wife doesn't come back and she takes off and goes to Paris. And those are real things. True, believing, praying people have real problems that they don't know how to fix. And that is what I thought was really important with this show, to show that how do you get through? How do God takes you through it. And one of my favorite moments in that show you saw was someone looks at Oliver and said, well, who was with you? Who was with you when you were left behind, when your wife left you? And you can see the pain. You saw Eric Mabius, a wonderful actor who takes really these scripts into his heart, and his face just, you can see all the pain inside. And he said, well, my father and I were not speaking at the time, and we were estranged. And the woman looks at him and says, well, then you mean you were alone? Who helped you through? And Eric takes forever, which is not a big Hallmark thing. They don't like it when you take forever. But we needed to see him realize how he had been brought through. And finally he looks and he said, I had my faith. And for a grown man to realize that that's what brought him through, and that ultimately that's all he needed to make it this far. If one message comes through 13 movies of Signed, Sealed, Delivered, and 10 previous episodes when it was a series, that alone was worth it all.
Yeah, no, it's really moving. It's entertaining. It's a lot of fun. And if you followed the progression of these characters, there's some interesting Easter eggs here for those who already know the storyline. But you wrote a book, Martha, and I'm going to leave you with this. It was called Inviting God to Your Wedding and Keeping God in Your Marriage, which really focuses on two people becoming one in Christ. Did that and your experience as a married woman impact your writing of this movie? It had to.
Oh, it absolutely did, because my husband and I were married under very difficult conditions. Every single thing went wrong. Everything went wrong at our wedding, and yet what mattered was that we got married. And then, ironically, the same week that we were shooting the pilot of Signed, Sealed, Delivered 8 years ago, my darling John had a massive stroke. And he has spent the last 8 years recovering so bravely, so heroically, so faithfully from all the deficits that he was faced with. And never once has he turned to God and said, why me? Never once has he questioned that God has a purpose for him. And he has used his challenges to inspire other people. And what I found is that it was not my idea to name this show The Vows We Have Made. But when I heard it, it was a Hallmark suggestion. And when I heard it, I went, that's it. Because the vows we have made are what carry us through our relationship with God. We keep those vows. We are one in Christ, and he will get us through, whether it is a stroke and you have lost physically something, or whether it is abandonment and you have lost emotionally, romantically, psychologically something. We will always, if the vow that we make to God first and foremost, to allow him to allow Christ to come live in our hearts and to embody all of that we need to be to be the best we can be for the Lord, then he will honor that.
What a great way to end the interview. I wish we had more time, Martha. Next time we'll do it in studio.
Want to talk more. You get me going. Raymond.
Okay, we'll do it again soon, I promise. Signed, Sealed, Delivered, The Vows We Have Made premieres Sunday, October 17th at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Hallmark Movies and Mysteries channel. Check your local listings. Be sure to watch. Martha, thank you so much. See you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Be well. That is all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. Cardinal Gerhard Mueller will join us next week, and a 25th anniversary celebration coming to you very soon. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.